first off, I'll start with your bio. It says your bio says you study political theory at Princeton. How much of what you studied there influenced how the story played out in Fireborne?
Yeah, a fair amount. I think the book was sort of inspired, especially the setting and the world building was inspired by Plato's Republic, which was something I studied in college. And it was sort of the idea of, in Plato's Republic, there are guardians who are supposed to be just rulers, and they're picked when they're really young to be trained to rule the city. And I always wondered why you would actually ever have that set up in a city. And then I thought of, what if you had dragons? What if you had a dragon riding culture where, dragons choose the rider at a young age, which is kind of an established trope in fantasy. Mm-hmm. And the dragon riders could be guardians. And so that was kind of the original idea, and that came from political theory.
Cool. Well, and that brings me to my other question. Obviously, dragons are very cool.
Yeah.
But there are various types of dragons in different cultures. What would you compare yours the most to? And, what's unique about dragons in your story?
That's a good question. I think mine are most, in size and in the way they interact with their humans. They're most like the How to Train Your Dragon dragons.
Okay.
A couple of ways that are different is that in this world, a dragon has to be fully mature before they can breathe fire, and it's called sparking. And so a big sort of political component to the dynamics of the world is if you have a fleet of dragons who haven't matured yet, who haven't sparked yet, effectively that limits you militarily. And so it's kind of equivalent to a nuclear arms race where you can have two countries that are waiting for the dragons to spark, because that's when war can start. So yeah.
It brings me to an unwritten question. Basically, you said that the dragons are kind of like How to Train Your Dragon, which is my favorite dragons ever.
Yeah.
But also, what's interesting is that they seem to have some odd connection, mentally or what is it?
Psychically,
yeah.
Yeah.
Where it seemed almost like an avatar-ish thing. Did that come into play at all? I mean, as far as connections and stuff like that?
It does, yeah. So the dragons in my book can't talk or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they are intelligent, and there is a connection with the riders, which is more or less strong depending on sort of the emotional state of either the dragon or the rider. And so one of the things that comes up in the story is this idea that you can spill over your emotions into your rider, or vice versa, the dragon can spill over. And so and it's something that can be a little scary. You can lose a little bit of control, but also if you sort of channel it, it can make you a very powerful rider.
Yeah.
And so that comes into play in the story.
Cool. I wanted to ask about your characters. Andy's name is short for Antigone.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of, obviously you said, Plato's Republic plays a part. But, so how much of your Annie compares to Antigone? And, what are the comparisons or differences between those two?
I reread Antigone, the play, the Greek play, recently. And it was funny, I hadn't read it since maybe high school, and it was funny reading it. I did feel like there were many similarities that I hadn't necessarily consciously thought about, especially now that I'm writing book 2, which I can't really talk about. But I think in the Greek, Antigone is she's determined to bury her brother, even though he broke the law and has been, there's been a ruling that he will not be buried, and she's so loyal to him that she goes ahead and does this thing that's illegal. She does what she considers right, even though it's illegal, and she's loyal to her family, to the person that she cares about, even though he's done something wrong. And I think that's sort of loyalty to people close to you, and the willingness to do anything, including go against authorities to protect them or do right by them, is something that really is very much a character trait in Annie, my character.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, there's a great line because a lot of what happens even in book 1 is the characters are sort of asked to do things that they consider wrong, and it's really hard for them to decide what to do. And there's a line in Antigone, the play, where her sister tells her, "You have," she says, "You have a warm heart for such cruel deeds." And I was just like, "Oh, that's exactly Annie." So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And then you have several other interesting characters, as well as Annie, including Lee, who are both orphans. But they have different social backgrounds. What kind of research did you do in creating these characters? These characters, Lee and Annie. Or if you did any, as far as like them being orphans.
Well, I didn't really. The thing that I researched most, that I would call research most with Lee, especially, was just the experiences I'd seen and her talking to people about when I lived in Paris for a while and I lived in Beijing for a while.
Oh.
And both of those cities have a strong history of surviving a revolution and the sort of effects on the culture, especially Beijing, where the revolution was not that long ago.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting talking to families, some of whom really loved Mao because he had made their family, their lives had improved since the Cultural Revolution, and others who had been quite well off and part of the aristocracy who no longer were so well off and who really had a lot of problems with the new order in China. So it was really interesting seeing the personal effects of regime change on these families.
Okay.
And I was drafting my first draft of Fireborne while I was living in Beijing. And so I think that was a big influence in how I sort of thought about Lee and the experiences he went through, losing everything, and how that would affect him. So,
yeah. But it is really interesting, how you brought in that whole idea, he's actually, the results of what can happen after a revolution, and it's wow, what does happen to these people and stuff. And
it's fascinating. For a while living in Paris, I learned that I was living on a street that was on the route that they took Marie Antoinette on.
Oh, okay.
When they were taking her to get beheaded, they took her on a 2-hour-long cart ride where she had to just sit there and people threw stuff at her for 2 hours before they beheaded her. And this woman wasn't, she had a lot of parties, she spent a lot of money, but it's arguable that she didn't deserve to have fruit thrown at her before she got beheaded.
Yeah.
And so just kind of the suffering that this person went through is very interesting to think about, what happens when a revolution with good principles becomes something that's controlled by a mob, and who are the people who are the victims from that. And a lot of time it's not who you expect.
That's amazing. Well, that's really cool. Which of your characters do you feel you relate to the most?
Definitely Annie.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a deposed aristocrat, so I definitely relate to Annie, especially her struggles with confidence. I was a scholarship kid in boarding school and in college, and so I think what I learned there was that often the biggest, my biggest struggle was just overcoming myself, overcoming my own insecurities, and believing that you deserve to be there is something that's hard to get over. And so I wanted to portray that in Annie. It's not that she's getting bullied by the rich kids or anything like that. It's just she's just not sure she should be there, and she has to get over.
Has to keep on pounding it into her that she actually does belong.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So your bio also says that you taught yourself Latin. What is it about that particular language that interested you to take on such a task? And do you, or will you be using it in any of your writing?
So I don't honestly know what was going through my head when I was in 8th grade. And I ordered Relax Latin off Amazon, and I worked my way through enough of the book that I tested into Latin 2 when I went to school, to boarding school, because I knew they would offer it there. And for some reason, anyway, I wouldn't do that now, but I was clearly very bored in 8th grade. And I really did love the language, and I loved the sense of that you were accessing secret information. And by junior year, we were translating the Aeneid, and there's just these beautiful passages similar to what I was describing with Marie Antoinette and Revolution. There are these passages where Troy is getting overrun and burned, and Aeneas needs to get out and get his family out, and he's losing everything. His entire city is just being destroyed. And I took I loved those passages so much. I remember like translating them and just like crying at my desk when I was like, you know, a teenager translating them. And I saved the translations that I had. And so there's scenes in the book where they're translating an epic poem that's central to their culture, and they're translating it from like an ancient language. And the lines that they translate are actually all adapted from the Aeneid and from my translations that I had from high school. So there's actually Aeneid quotes in the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably haven't gotten to that part yet. Who have been your influences as far as writing goes?
So definitely like, first of all, Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling. I read Harry Potter 4 like on repeat when I was a child. I think more recently I was reading The Scorpio Races and Shiver around the time I started this book. Those are by Maggie Stiefvater. And I just remember, I just loved the way she used alternating point of views to like show, you know, a romance where there's eyes on each other, where there's sort of this dramatic irony about what does the other person think about me, what do I think about them, and just like only the audience really knows the full picture of these two people who are thinking about each other a lot. And I wanted to have that in my book. And then very sort of in the revising stage, the works of Cynthia Williams-Chua were really, really helpful to me. So like The Demon King, I think she just does she does great world building. And so just reading it through and thinking about how she set up her world, how she revealed it, it was like a master's class. So
nice.
Yeah.
And I know you said you couldn't say anything about the upcoming book. Do you have any other projects aside from that?
Right now it's really the Fireborne.
Okay,
because it's a trilogy. So after that I'm writing the third book. So, yeah.
So you're already in the second one right now?
I'm revising it now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, well that's all I have for you.